new emissions controls and new regulations around how often emissions will be monitored and things like that. A lot of the monitoring focuses on methane. It doesn't tend to focus on, for example, benzene in the past. I don't know for sure what'll come up, but I haven't seen anything yet that suggests, necessarily that the AQCC will mandate certain kind of, say, air toxics monitoring. It may be that COGCC will require this as a part of new developments. Personally, that looks more likely to me, but of course it's always a little hard to read the tea leaves on these things.
Cumulative impact. That's kind of how COGCC is couching their work with CDPHE's cumulative impact.
Yes.
Just curious on when you're talking about air quality control, doing some sort of monitoring, is that site by site? Will we on-site monitoring?
So they require a certain frequency of leak detection and repair activities, and there's discussion about changing sort of the thresholds for what kinds of facilities have to be monitored, how quickly they have to be monitored as they come online, the frequency of monitoring, the size of units that need to be monitored. Most of the changes I've seen are in that space, and not necessarily continuous on-site monitoring. As you can imagine from that video I showed you of the plume, it's not easy to put out one sensor or even 4 sensors. And most of the time you're not going to be in the plume. It's going to go between your sensors if you're close to the site. So that's why we rely a lot on these mobile monitoring technologies, so that we don't have expensive equipment sitting in one point and the plume's going a different direction. We can go out and find that plume and document the concentrations. The downside is we can't be out there driving 24/7, right, monitoring all the time. So there are trade-offs in these sampling strategies.
How do you decide who and what to study? Is it just based upon request, or?
Sometimes it's based upon request. Sometimes it's based upon sort of our scientific interests. So we really started working in the early part of this decade on oil and gas issues because we were approached by people in Garfield County who were trying to understand what the impacts were there. And so we had done a bit of work before out of state looking at emissions impacts. Since that time, we've done quite a bit of work with the National Park Service looking at oil and gas impacts in the Bakken up in North Dakota near Theodore Roosevelt National Park. We had a big study this summer in Carlsbad-Caverns National Park. There's a lot of oil and gas activity that's coming closer and closer to that park. So we work with a variety of different sponsors to try and help them find answers to the questions they have and to understand basic scientific information about these activities too.
So you are managing and handling all of Broomfield's?
We're a partner in that study. We submitted a proposal to Broomfield. They actually ended up selecting 2 proposals. The other was by a company called Ajax Analytics, and Broomfield asked us to work together on this study. So they're doing more the low-cost sensor side of monitoring, and we're focused more on the more reference-grade VOC speciation monitoring.
And that has been in place since about January 2019?
It started, I think, in October or November. It's been just over a year now that we've been monitoring.
Because I believe the board saw some results. I think there's been like first quarter, maybe a second quarter.
Yes, tomorrow night or the third quarter results are being presented in Broomfield.
Okay.
So.
And to date, those results have demonstrated, I recall from the study, that none of the findings of any of the monitoring to date has found anything in excessive of the current recommendation thresholds. Is that correct?
That's true. We see increases in things including benzene, but the increases don't bring concentrations to the health guideline values recommended by CDPHE to Broomfield. But as we discussed, there are different health guideline values that are out there from different agencies.
Okay. So,
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I think it is right before this one. Yes. Because earlier it said 3 parts per billion, 3 to 9 parts per billion, 3 chronic, 9 acute. And then this slide says less than 3 parts per billion chronic health guideline. What does that mean?
So this is just saying all of these concentrations we're measuring around the North Front Range are below this chronic health guideline. They're in the range of 0.1 to 0.3. Yeah, even the gas station value is below that on average.
Well, and let me ask, do we have our other guests?
Yeah. So I believe that Professor Helmig is here.
So, I'll let Mr. Baker ask his question, but if you'd like to start moving forward, we'll let you present next.
How often are these mobile detectors deployed in the field?
So we do this on a forecast basis, and we're really focused more on the winter when we tend to get more stagnant air conditions. So we've been out probably 10 or 12 times over the years so far, but we'll be out more frequently as we move through the winter months because that's when the models suggest and our intuition also suggests that we're most likely to get peak concentrations under normal operating conditions. Of course, if you have an upset or something, this could occur at other times of the year as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. And with that, we will have Professor Helmig. Don't go too far away, though, there may be additional questions for you as we continue our discussion.
I'll stay.
So as he comes up, Mayor, I'll just do a brief introduction. So Professor Helmig is with the Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research at the University of Colorado, and he's going to kind of go over the air quality monitoring being conducted for the city of Longmont and for Boulder County. And he braved the weather to come here, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for an introduction, and Mayor Melendez and board members, thanks for having me here, and sorry for running late. I think I could have ridden a horse today and be faster than trying to drive. I left Boulder before 3 o'clock actually, and just barely made it here. It's a total mess out there. So I have a presentation that's on my laptop right now, and I haven't been able to transfer that, upload that. So how does that work here with the technology? I can present it from the laptop, or if it on this.
On here. And then you can just drag it on the desktop.
Okay, I found something. Okay, then there's a mouse here.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, good. All right, well, good, we got that to work. So, as you probably know by now, I'm located in Boulder with the university, but I've also now have one contract outside of the university, which actually was the city of Longmont through a private company I started because that's what Longmont actually preferred in this case. So there's different options, and for me, the way I'm pursuing this right now. So let me start here. So what we're doing is, and Dr. Collette mentioned this as part of his presentation, is we're doing real-time monitoring. Real-time monitoring, and I will explain to you what that means. And there's actually two things that are coming together. It's real-time monitoring and real-time reporting. Yeah, so there's two components of that. So what this means, we have analytical monitors that monitor air constituents or pollutants at a site, and that data that's being reported is within minutes time frame posted on a web portal, on a website. Yeah? So that data is then accessible to the community, citizens, industry, health professionals, athletic coaches, lots of people. And I've had this idea a few years ago, and I've really been surprised how this has been embraced by the community. So we have several of these programs running now, and what I show you in the center, that's the web portal, the web page for the Boulder Reservoir data reporting, and that by now has been visited on the order of 25,000 times. Who are all these people going on there and looking at these websites so often? But they're there because I get a lot of inquiries and questions. So to my own surprise, this real-time monitoring with real-time reporting has really been embraced by the community. So I want to walk you through what this entails and what the benefits are. So the real-time monitoring for air quality and oil and gas emissions. So what we're doing here, we monitor these constituents at high time resolution, and high time resolution here means on the scale of minutes to hours. The data are made available immediately. And the monitoring, it runs all the time. We don't need to be there. It's automated. It runs by itself when it's set up. It runs 24/7 every day of the year, and that includes weekends, holidays, Super Bowl. Even right now with the whiteout right there, it's running right now in these places. The data are shared online, transparent as they come in with the public, with town, industry, immediately. By doing these measurements right at the site at the moment when the plumes pass through, we can achieve very high data quality. It's a very crucial advantage of doing these measurements in the place where you're intending to do them. And that's been documented. Our program has been audited actually by now 4 times. There's an international organization, this stands for Global Atmospheric Watch, World Calibration Center. So they've come by 4 times and quality controlled our measurements, and we've passed on each of these occasions. So the procedures we're using, they meet or exceed EPA, NOAA, and this is the World Meteorological Organization's requirements. So it's about the highest quality and observations you can achieve these days, which at times, may be crucial when you wonder, are these observations legally defensible? And I would claim you can't do it much better than the way this is set up in this situation. And what this also allows is you can send out alerts. When pollution levels exceed a certain threshold level you're concerned about, we could fire out an email that same minute to a distribution list, whoever's interested in receiving these. And there's been requests from athletic coaches in Boulder. They want to know when certain pollutant levels are high. Should we take the kids inside, or is it okay to be outside? So we can do that. It's actually pretty easy once you have this set up. With this real-time, high-time resolution monitoring, you can detect peak concentrations, which is essential, and we've heard about this a little bit, for assessing acute health effects. It allows citizens who can watch these data as they're coming in right at this moment. It allows them to relate experienced health symptoms they may experience to what's actually out there in the atmosphere right now. It may give them comfort. Maybe they have symptoms and the air is just normal. Or maybe there is a pollution event, and which then allows the community to provide an association between their symptoms and the actual, at this moment, air composition that you have out there. This allows you to capture exceptional events. You don't need to get an alert and pack your equipment and go out there because it's already there. It's running, it's ready for these different type of operations you may experience. It allows you to characterize back-to-back frequency of pollution events. You have an event, another event, another event. It's there ready to capture all of these. It characterizes the length of pollution events. It characterizes the concentration increases at night, which are actually quite significant, and I'll show you that in a moment. And it also has an affordability component, because once this is set up, the per sample analysis cost actually drops to a very small fraction of what it takes you to get a container or a platform ready, take it out to the field, take some samples, maybe take them back to the lab. That's very, very labor intensive. Whereas this is running right now, while I'm here, and it will run, through the night tomorrow and so forth. So the operational cost at that point gets really affordable. So what we are monitoring, this is what we're doing in Longmont right now. We're monitoring methane, then volatile organic compounds, and that's a group, a whole suite of species. And what's in here is basically that's what we see mostly. Those are the ones that are we're seeing at the highest concentrations, and you see benzene in here. We've talked about that a lot. And some of these are tracer compounds, which allow us then to associate what we see to certain source categories. In Longmont, we're also monitoring nitrogen oxides and ozone, particulate matter, which is also a major health concern. And the city also is interested in carbon dioxide for the sustainability program. And then a must that always comes along are meteorological variables. You want to know where the air came from. And then we also have a webcam because we want to know, how are things out there while we're doing these measurements. And this is, these are the shelters that are in use right now. So this is the monitoring shelter at the Boulder Reservoir, which is a fixed, simple, steel facility. And instrumentation is then inside. What's important is it's climate controlled, but that's really all you need. And we have this mobile instrument trailer, which you can move, around to different locations as desired. This is the shelter that's been erected by the city of Longmont at the Union Reservoir. It's right here, and we're about to move in there. And this is the site at the Longmont Airport right now that's been operating for almost 3 months. You can see all of these are non-motorized, and we find that's actually a crucial advantage because you don't need to worry about exhaust and evaporative emissions from the vehicle. You have a lot of gasoline, you have oils in the car, and that's all volatile organic compounds. So we like to keep those away. So this is, clean air facilities. We don't need to worry about, picking up contaminations from the platform itself. This is some of the instrumentation. I imagine for you that's just black boxes, but I want to just emphasize that these are all research-grade regulatory instruments. They all follow regulatory requirements, so very similar to what CDPHE is doing, what EPA is doing. It's a monitor for particles. This one is for nitrogen oxides. Then this one here is, for instance, for methane. This is one for ozone. This is the instrument that measures the volatile organic compounds, which is one that we actually built. We fabricate those ourselves in our lab. And then what's really crucial is how you calibrate this. So we spend a lot of effort and a lot of money in what doesn't look too excited, but these are calibration standards, and they come actually all the way from the United Kingdom because that's the lab that's endorsed by the WMO organizations to provide these high accuracy standards for this degree of monitoring. And so I've shown you this on the left already. These are the 2 examples of the sites that are running here around the corner right now. Again, so this is the site at the Boulder Reservoir. You can see here, these are readings of methane as it bounces up and down. This is the data over 3 days. And here is just another example that shows 2 of the primary hydrocarbons that come from oil and gas operations. So this is ethane and propane. And you can see this is really dynamic. And this, it may be low, just, 1 or 2 parts per billion. And, a few hours later, it may go up to 10, 15, and it may come down again. And it may go up again. It bounces around all the time. It's very critical, very important to know. This is the portal right now for Longmont. It's a little bit different, but does the same sort of thing. It plots the data for, it gives you temperature, but then there's carbon dioxide, there's methane, there's ozone, and there'll be a few other variables on there very, very soon. So, and this is, you can just go on your computer, go to that link down here, and you see the same thing for the last measurements from, 15 minutes ago. For the VOCs, these volatile organic compounds that are of high interest for oil and gas emissions, what we use here is a technique called chromatography. And what this does is it separates all these individual gases out there, one by one, basically. And this shows you the separation. You basically catch them out of the air, like, think about it like using a fishing net and catch everything that's in the water. And then you have jellyfish, you have little fish, you have big fish, you have starfish. And then you separate them all into groups. And that's what this chromatography is doing. So each of these signals is one type of compound. This is ethane here, this is ethene, this is propane, and here we have the butanes, we have pentane, and benzene is actually, it's a minor component. Benzene is big here. But what I want to emphasize with this is that we are ready for surprises. This is a generic method that will capture the VOCs out there. If somebody has an idea of a new VOC to release or uses a compound we didn't even think about, we will see it here. So this is a generic method that captures the bulk of volatile organic compounds that we have experience with, that we know those are the potential candidates that are out there. Okay, I'm going to show you a few of the data products so you get an idea of what type of information you can expect from this monitoring. So this will now, with the next slide, show you data from the Boulder Reservoir. So the Boulder Reservoir site, it's here out at the Boulder Reservoir. And it's actually not within the city. It's a park. It's a county park, a city park here. And, it's mostly open space. And then, you have Longmont here. And you don't have much oil and gas development on this side until you get, further out here to the east. And what we've done here is we compared the measurements from the Boulder Reservoir with this, a comparison study up at Nivard Ridge, which is up on the Peak-to-Peak Highway in the mountains, where there's really, there's just trees and bears and things, but not much human activity. And this shows you a reconstruction of the airflow, which you can get from NOAA. This, actually, each of these lines is one of the samples we've collected, something like 12,000 VOC samples by now. And if you look at where did the air come from all of these samples, you can see it comes from everywhere, but it comes faster from the west. And because the length of these, they're called trajectories, I think they're 12 hours. So the flow from the west is faster, but it comes pretty much from everywhere. And what we get down here in the plains is mostly transported from the west. There's very little flow the opposite direction. So then this is the comparison of the data for ethane, which is our favorite oil and gas tracer, because it doesn't really get released by much else. And there's now a year and a half of ethane data from the Boulder Reservoir down here, and this is the comparison at Nivard Ridge, up the mountains in Netherlands. This is the same concentration scale, and here you can see now these thousands and thousands of measurements, how it bounces up and down, all the time. So it's very important to understand that when you want to know the concentrations out there, a single measurement doesn't really tell you a whole lot, because depending on when you take the measurement, you may hit a really high moment, or it may be really, really low, just a little bit later. So it bounces around. So to really capture and understand this, you want to try to really describe this dynamic behavior. And of course, what you see here, the air up at Nivard Ridge, peak to peak, it's much, much cleaner than what we have down here in the plains, where these result in these highly elevated levels of ethane on average. And you don't see these peak events up here in the mountains. Those are down here. That's what we're concerned about, because these are the peaks. The peaks are what determines the chronic health effects. So you want to be able to see and watch and observe these peaks, understand how high are they, how often do they happen. And this is now, this is a year and a half of data. What I'm going to do in the next slide, I'm just going to zoom in into 3 days instead of 500 days. This is just 3 days, and that shows you data over 3 days for different compounds. This is methane, this is ethane and propane. These are butane, benzene. What you're interested is in here. So we have a pollution event, and it lasts maybe 6 hours. On a Saturday. It happens on the Saturday. But the system is running, and you see methane goes up, and then ethane and propane goes up, butane, everything goes up, like the fingers of your hand, almost together. And benzene and toluene go up. So it's the same plume. That's a very strong indication for us. It's coming from the same type of source. There's a plume that has picked up some pollution, and it's all being transported now to the Boulder Reservoir, and we see it there. We can tell you how long it lasted, what the peak levels were, and and before and after, it was really clean. It was much, much lower. If you would take samples here, you would, nothing to worry about. But if you are right here at the right moment and capture this, you get a much different picture. So by doing, these thousands of measurements, then you can develop an understanding how do these compounds behave in the atmosphere as a function, like this is time of the day. So this is broken up, so we just what's called binned. We put all the data from 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock together. So each of these here are hundreds and hundreds of measurements, and they show the distribution where this is the median, this is the 75th percentile. And if you look closely, you see that at night it really goes up. It builds up at night, it goes higher and higher and higher. So, about 8 in the morning on average, you have a value of 7 or 8 for ethane here. And then by the end of the day, it goes down to half. It's a very typical phenomenon we see, which is driven by the lack of mixing or the weakness of mixing we have at night. Similar to seasonal behavior here, it's very significant. You can see in the winter, this is November, December, January, levels are much higher than in spring and the summer. And again, that's driven by the mixing. We have snow on the ground, we heard about this, there's inversions, they're very stable, and pollution accumulates in these low inversions and build up to much higher levels. So if you consider night time in the winter, you on average have levels that are 4, 5, 6, 7 times higher than daytime in the summer. Yeah, it's and this is all driven just by the meteorology. And these data really allow you to capture that. What we do here is we go to the Boulder Reservoir, we look at where the wind's from. So we correlate each measurement with the winds at that moment, and then we can put the concentrations in these wind roses. So for ethane, the oil and gas tracer here, so you have the color scale here representing the concentrations. This is where we are. This is the distribution of the oil and gas development in the area. And you can see when we get flow winds from these sectors, you have much more red here, indicating this is where your primary sources for these elevated concentration sources. When we get a plume, it typically comes from this area. When we get air from the west, from the mountains, see it's mostly blue. There's much lower levels and much cleaner air that we get from the west. So.
I'm sorry, can you explain what the grid maps are versus the...
Oh, so this is, So this is a map that was downloaded from the COGCC website at one point, and it lets you choose existing wells and wells permitted and wells that are being applied for. And this was actually from, I don't know, a year ago or something. It's just a differentiation of the status of the wells. I think there's some 25,000 wells, something like this in the whole region. And this is what at that time was just listed at the website as still in the permitting phase.
So what is the red?
So the red is where the Boulder Reservoir is. It's actually just shifted a little bit. So this is where we're sitting here. So you can.
The red dots, though, it looks like there's a whole bunch of massive red dots.
Oh, so the brownish ones, the red ones, those are all producing wells, as far as I understand the website. These are all established producing wells, and the colored ones, and you can go on the site right now and just click which well sites you want to display, and you'll get something very similar. So then, I've shown you a little bit of this already. Here you have, one of these peak events. So, levels go up from low and before they drop again. And so then what we do is we pick for every single sample, we look at the air transport. And you can do this. You can go to a NOAA site and get these what's called back trajectories. It shows you the path the air has taken before it got encountered right here. So this star here matches this one. So this peak happened when we had this airflow. For just this one, and then I can do this again and again and again. So now if you do this thousands of times with all these data we have, we do something that's called a footprint analysis. And it allows you to identify where in relation to where you are sited are your primary pollution sources. Where get these compounds, where are they added to the air? Where do they get released? So I've done this here for ethane. So we're at the Boulder Reservoir. So when air comes from here, these directions, you see a lot of blue. But when we have flow here from the east, then it's much more likely to have these elevated ethane. And then if you take all the VOCs, which is of really high interest for the ozone situation we have, because the VOCs are a driver for this ozone production. This was just the oil and gas tracer, just one compound, but now these I think are 16 compounds, all weighted by the size of the molecule and the structure, and then this is the footprint that you get. This is from where at Boulder, if you sit in Boulder at the reservoir, this is from where Boulder receives the bulk of the VOCs that drive the ozone levels in the atmosphere. This is all from this data. So what we have here right now, we have ongoing monitoring at the Boulder Reservoir. There's this comparison sampling. It's not quite as high time resolution. It collects a sample every day up here of the peak-to-peak highway. Then these are the two sites coming in. This is already running. This is just a few days away now in Longmont, by the city of Longmont, and this is where we are here up right now. So, if this was going to be added, something similar to this type of program, this would be a wonderful, beautiful network and the beauty is that anything you measure here is straight comparable to what we have here, because it's the same quality control, the same procedures, the same calibration protocols. So we can do this within 3-4% accuracy. So, if we see, 0.5 ppb here and you see 0.6, we know for sure this is 0.1 more than what we see here or vice versa. So, that I think it would really enhance the value of this type of monitoring here, because you have ongoing comparison measurements that build on the same method and same principle. So,
I don't mean to interrupt, but I haven't seen your presentation until just now. I don't know how much longer you have, but we have only 9 minutes.
yeah, and I think I have 2 more slides, so I think we're in good shape. And I apologize for not providing them, but I was actually in Europe until Friday night attending one of these VOCs expert meetings where we just sit together in a room for 3 days and talk about how to calibrate these systems and how to figure out the problems we have and make it even better next time we do this. So, the real-time monitoring, what I would propose to do is to pick a central site that's in proximity to some of the operations you have. And again, this is from the COGCC website. I looked up, how your well distribution looks like. It's a central site that runs continuously, that also addresses of course, the citizens' interests and concerns, because they, usually want to know how the areas where they live, where they work, where they exercise. And I think this boardwalk park here would probably be a quite suitable location. And then this would run around the clock all the time, and that could be supplemented then, with a distributed canister sites network, where, either on a regular time basis, or you could hand these out to citizens so that when, there are symptoms or complaints, they'd be able to collect air in these canisters. And we heard a lot about that in the previous presentation. And, we do something similar to CSU. We have a canister system. So this is now sitting in the lab where these canisters are put on the instrument, and we run those for methane and VOCs, so in a very similar fashion. And I think this is the last slide I have. So to give you just an idea, how long we've been doing this. So we've been doing this actually for 33 years. And that includes all these sites here. It's ongoing right now, actually in Greenland, at really, really clean background level. And similar to what I showed you for the Boulder Reservoir, and it's web reported, it's in real time, presented on the website. We're doing it actually at one of the highest mountains in the Alps for the German Environmental Agency. Same thing, the gas chromatogram.
So, do you mind if we got to questions? I think we can look at the experience here.
Okay, and that's, yeah, and that's my last slide. So, yes, absolutely.
Questions from the board?
Next question.
Yes.
You talked about the mobile instrument trailer versus a more fixed building.
Yeah.
Is there a disadvantage? Do you imply that the mobile trailer would move around town, or would we still keep it fixed, just in a trailer?
I think that's flexible. You know, if your interest is to conduct observations in a fixed site for a long time period. Let's see if you're interested in how the impact of a certain site development changes over time while it's going through the different stages. You know, I don't think you want to move. You want to have consistency and be in the same place, you know, over that time window that you're interested in. But, you know, you may be in a site and you may not see a whole lot in what you're after. You know, if a site looks like it's moderate, you don't see much pollution there, but you have another site come up where you have complaints, citizens' interest to operate this in a different location. You know, with a trailer like this, you can be moved in a day. The requirement, though, is, you know, you want to be on electrical power. You know, that makes the operation much easier than generating your own power. So, you know, it's fixed, but it can be moved, you know, but with relatively moderate effort.
Mr. Wilson, do you have any questions?
I guess just real quick, we talked about benzene levels. What do you see as far as the pollutants that you've measured? Is it, what ranges do you see?
Yeah, so, you know, at the Boulder Reservoir, you know, so this is benzene here, the signal. And as I said, the signal height is pretty much linearly proportional to how much is out there. So there's ways less benzene than the pentanes or the butanes. Propane is much more, ethane is much more. So, you know, after almost 3 years of monitoring now at the Boulder Reservoir, our average median value is in the range of 0.1 to 0.15 parts per billion. So very similar to what Professor Collette has observed in some areas here. We do see, though, and that was surprising to us, I don't have it here right now, but the benzene windrows doesn't look quite as extreme, but it looks still very similar. We were anticipating, you know, that the city of Boulder, which is down here to the south, would be the main source of benzene, but it's actually quite moderate. We still see very significant signal here of benzene coming from these sectors to the northeast.
So that benzene gets a lot of attention, but there's, looking at your early graph, it seems like there may be some other bigger concerns.
Well, you know, what we don't understand too well is, where is it? Is how these different gases interact in a human system together. You know, you know, there's certainly good motivation and reason why we focus on benzene, but the health assessments and these health safety thresholds, they're mostly defined for an individual compound exposure. But that's, you know, even though this is a highly technical slide, but I like it because what it demonstrates is when there's benzene out there, it's not just benzene by itself. You know, when you get benzene, if you have a 1 ppb benzene, you most likely have 2 ppb of toluene, you have these other xylenes and ethylbenzene. At the same time, if you have 1 ppb benzene, you will have, you know, 25 parts per billion of propane, you probably have 50 parts per billion of ethane. So you have other gases that are elevated at the same time. You know, the benzene, we happen to know benzene reasonably well from its health effects because it has been studied so much by the health effects professionals, but they haven't studied, you know, 1 ppb benzene in parallel to propane and ethane and the butanes. So I'm a little bit reluctant in saying, well, this was a safe level or not a safe level just based on one single compound, you know, because there's other components here that at the same time were elevated, and how they play together in a human system that's highly diverse. You know, we all respond differently, and elderly and children behave differently. That's really tricky. It's not the core of my expertise, but I just want to caution against.
We need to really, we've got 2 minutes, and I know that one business
Would your technology allow us to identify a specific site or pad, getting in any of the elements formation, above the threshold or above the level?
I think it would, with this type of approach, where you do the correlation between what you see in each sample with the wind transport, the wind direction at the site, right at that moment. So if you have a strong source, on this sector, you'll see it in this type of data analysis. If you don't have anything to the west, it would like that. You might just look the opposite. So you can do it with this analytical tool, but you can also do it with this analytical tool to some extent, where you sit at a site and you look at, you have flow from here, from there, and when flow comes from there, levels are this high. When flow comes from there, they are not this high. And you do this hundreds and hundreds of times, and then you get, this type of source footprint analysis.
How many times in Roller, since you've been implemented there, have alerts gone out since you started?
I'm sorry.
Have the alerts gone out since you started, and what was like?
Yeah. So I said we can send out alerts. It'd be easy. We have not this alert system. It hasn't been.
So no alerts have gone out since you started?
Because Boulder County didn't ask us to set notifications up. It would be easy, it's just the computer that.
Ability, but it's not
Yeah,
implemented, so
Boulder.
alerts have gone out in Boulder ever since you've.
Yeah, Boulder County did not ask us. Boulder County did not ask us to implement that. Longmont indicated to us they have that interest, and the question is, where is this going to get sent to? I think they want to have it be sent to the city for a start.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
I can't remember anymore.
Okay, Mrs. Lawson, do you have any questions? I have some questions too, but I'm going to hold mine because I know we have a very long other schedule. My apologies to all of our other folks who came this evening. First of all, I do want to thank Professor Collette and Helmig for making the trek out here this evening. But my apologies to Great Western Oil, Extraction Oil and Gas. I know some of you folks are here in the room, so obviously this discussion, our work session, will be continued, and we will need to do another call at another point in time. Hopefully on a better date when we don't have pressing issues such as the weather. So we're going to take about a minute to move into the next session, and then we will start the actual board meeting in about 1 minute.
Hey, thank you again. Are you going to stay here tonight? Or are you going to
Spend the night? My wife told me. And I grabbed it. I grabbed the bag. I have to stay. I'm not really keen on doing that. Because an appointment at 10 in Boulder tomorrow morning. I don't know. This was really stressful.
Yeah,
And I
I'm sorry.
tried to be here on time.
Well, no, you were fine. I mean, we had Professor Collette lined up first anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. So thank you for making the trip. I just hate to think that you're taking the parallel journey. Thank you. We may have some other follow-up questions for you. I mean, I had a couple just contextually. So if you wouldn't mind, just maybe send you an email with some more questions.
Test.
Get ready to see you. That's
Try now.
Test.
I just had an email with the title Cooch Bags.
What's that?
I just have an email. Well, that just says it all, doesn't it?
I think I got that earlier
Good evening. Yes, hi. Thank you so much for coming out. I do apologize that we ran out of time. But I wanted to make sure that you guys all had your ample time to speak too. And if we got you there, we'd be here at least for another hour. And we have so just let everybody know we will be continuing this discussion. You guys will have to be at the top of the agenda to be able to use it. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for making the trip. Okay.
I'll see if I can track it
Okay.
Yeah, they've been refrigerating that gavel so many times.
Well, I'm trying to call a meeting to order.
I'm a little impressed.
I need some folks to
Gonna be a long night.
be here. I heard a doorbell. Yeah. Okay, good. Going to call our meeting to order for Monday, November 25, 2019. Ms. Iker, please take roll call.
Mayor Christie Melendez,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett,
Here.
Miles Baker,
Here.
Barry Wilson,
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer,
Here.
Tom Jones, David Soslowski.
Here.
Mr. Sosowski, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration. Mr. McCarter?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The executive session that is at the far end of your agenda should be stricken. We've decided to reschedule